My best friend said I'd be a failure who'd never make real money, not knowing I controlled her last chance at income. And I want to tell you about the 4 minutes during which she figured it out. My best friend was named Cordelia. Cordelia and I had been best friends since we were 16. We were both 33 at the time of the conversation I am about to describe. Cordelia had been doing a specific thing to me for the past 5 years. Cordelia had been making comments about my career. The context was that I had been a public school teacher for 9 years. I had been teaching middle school English. I had been making about $60,000 a year. Cordelia had been a marketing executive at various companies for the past 12 years. Cordelia had been making approximately $180,000 a year at her peak. Cordelia had been treating my teaching career as a thing to be condescending about. The thing Cordelia had been not knowing was that I had a side business. The side business was an educational technology company that I had founded with 2 other teachers. The company had been valued at approximately $26 million at our most recent funding round. I had been the chief executive officer. My ownership stake had been worth approximately $8 million on paper. My salary from the company had been approximately $400,000 a year on top of my teaching salary. I had been keeping the company quiet because I had been wanting to keep teaching. The teaching had been my passion. I had also been not interested in correcting Cordelia's framing of my career. The conversation I am about to describe happened at a dinner. Cordelia had been recently laid off. Cordelia had been 3 glasses of wine into the dinner. Cordelia said, "You have it so easy. You have a teacher's salary. You will never make real money. You are going to be a failure who lives off her teacher's pension." I had been processing the fact that Cordelia had been saying this 5 years into a steady stream of similar comments. I said, "Cordelia, I want to tell you something." Cordelia said, "What?" I said, "I have been running a company for 7 years." Cordelia said, "What kind of company?" I said, "An education technology company. The company is called Lyra Learning. I am the chief executive officer. The company is valued at approximately $26 million. I make about $400,000 a year from the company. This is on top of my teaching salary." Cordelia had been quiet for about 4 minutes. Then Cordelia said, "Why have you not been telling me?" I said, "Because of how you have been talking to me about my career for 5 years. The not telling has been the cover. You have been judging me as a teacher for 5 years. I have been letting you because I have been figuring out what you would do with the information." Cordelia said, "I have been job searching for 6 months. Does your company have any marketing positions?" I had been processing the fact that Cordelia had been pivoting in real time. I had been processing the fact that Cordelia had been not apologizing. I said, "Cordelia, we have a marketing position open. The salary is approximately $110,000. I am not going to recommend you for it. You have spent 5 years telling me I would be a failure. The failure telling told me what kind of colleague you would be. Please find another job." The dinner ended. We have not spoken in 2 years. That was 2 years ago. 2 full years of silence. And I want to tell you what happened when the silence broke, because that is when I learned something worse than the dinner. 2 years after the dinner, I was at a weekend brunch with Robin. Robin is my confidant. Robin knows the full story. I told Robin that I still thought about Cordelia. I told her I still wondered if I had been too cold that night. I said I kept replaying the way Cordelia's face looked when I told her I would not recommend her. Robin put her fork down and looked at me. "You told her the truth and she asked you for a job," Robin said. "That's not a friend. That's a client." I told Robin that I kept almost texting Cordelia. I had done this maybe 15 times over 2 years. Robin asked me, "What would you even say?" I did not have an answer. That same week, on a Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed while I was grading papers. It was a text from Cordelia. The text said, "Hey, I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about you. Can we get coffee? I miss my friend." I read it once. I read it again. I set my phone face down on the table. I stared at that text for a full day. There was no mention of the dinner. There was no mention of the company. There was no apology. Just, "I miss my friend." I showed the text to Emilio that night. Emilio is my partner. He read the text, handed my phone back, and said, "She didn't say sorry. She said she missed you. Those are 2 different sentences." He was right. But the part of me that remembered being 16 with Cordelia, the part that remembered sharing a locker and driving around with the windows down, that part wanted, "I miss my friend," to be enough. So I agreed to coffee. I told myself I was doing it for closure. When Cordelia walked in, she looked different. She was thinner. She looked tired in a way that was not just about sleep. She was wearing a jacket I recognized from years ago. She sat down across from me and she smiled. She started talking about old memories right away. She brought up a road trip we took when we were 22. She brought up the time we tried to cook a full dinner for a group of friends and set off the smoke alarm twice. She did not mention the dinner. She did not mention the company. She did not mention being laid off. I felt myself softening. I could feel it happening, like something loosening in my chest, like a knot I had been carrying for 2 years was starting to come undone. I hated how good it felt. Then Cordelia's voice got a little quieter and she said, "I've been doing some freelance consulting, but it's been rough." She paused. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just wanted you to know where I've been." Cordelia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She looked at me and said, "I'm sorry I was a bad friend." I felt my whole chest open up. That was what I had been waiting to hear for 2 years. I almost cried right there in the coffee shop. I was so close to saying I forgive you. Then Cordelia's phone buzzed on the table between us. She glanced at it fast and then she flipped it face down. But I had already seen the screen. It was a job alert notification. It was a job alert from my company. Cordelia had set up job alerts for openings at my company. She had set them up before this coffee meeting. The apology, the old memories, the hand squeeze, the "I'm not asking for anything." All of it had been a runway. My expression did not change, but something inside me closed. It closed like a door shutting in a quiet house. I finished my coffee. I said, "It was good seeing you, Cordelia." She looked a little confused. I picked up my bag and I left. I drove home and I sat in my car. Then I called Robin. I told her about the coffee. And then I said, she rehearsed the apology. She set up job alerts for my company before she even texted me. The apology had not been the point. The apology had been the door. And behind the door was the same thing that had been there at the dinner. A job. That was all I had ever been worth to Cordelia once she found out what I had. Over the next 2 weeks, Cordelia started texting me like nothing had happened at the coffee shop. Light little messages, a funny article, an old photo of the 2 of us at a Halloween party, a link to a song we used to listen to. Every text was casual. Every text was exactly the kind of thing the old Cordelia would have sent. I responded to each one. I kept my replies short. I told myself myself I was just being polite. Emilio noticed. We were on the couch one night and I picked up my phone for probably the 4th time in 20 minutes. And Emilio looked at me and said, "Are you letting her back in?" I said I was just being civil. Emilio said, "Civil doesn't make you check your phone every 5 minutes." Then Robin called me. Her voice had that tone it gets when she is about to say something she knows I do not want to hear. She said, "Cordelia reached out to me on social media. She asked me if you two were talking again. Then she asked me what it's like working at your company." I pulled my car to the side of the road. I had never told Cordelia that Robin worked at my company. Cordelia had found out on her own. Cordelia had been doing research. She had been mapping it out like a project, like a strategy. This was not reconnection. This was reconnaissance. That same week, Dario messaged me. Dario is my oldest male friend, and he also works at the company. He sent me a message that said, "Hey, weird question. Did you give someone named Cordelia my contact info?" She connected with me online and asked about our marketing department. I had not given Cordelia his information. She had reached out to him directly. She was reaching into my company through back channels while texting me old photos and pretending all she wanted was the friendship. I called Cordelia that evening. I said, "Cordelia, why are you reaching out to people at my company?" There was a long pause. Then Cordelia said, "I was just networking. I didn't think it was a big deal." I said, "You told me you weren't asking for anything. You said that to my face at the coffee shop." Cordelia said, "I'm not asking you. I'm just exploring options. Your company has openings. Am I not allowed to apply to a public job listing?" I said, "You set up job alerts before you even texted me. I saw your phone." Another long silence. Then Cordelia said, "I needed a job before I needed a friend. I'm sorry, but I need both." And there it was. Honest, finally. Ugly, but honest. I thought that might be the end of it. It was not. 2 days later, the hiring manager at my company flagged something for me. Cordelia had applied. She had gone through the normal application process and submitted her resume for the open marketing director role. The hiring manager brought the application to me and asked what I wanted to do. If I blocked her application, I was using my position to punish her. If I let it through and she got the job, she would believe the friendship had bought her a seat at the table. There was no clean answer. I went home that night and told Emilio. He listened to the whole thing. When I finished, he said, "If you block her application, you're using your power to punish her. If you let it through, she's going to think the friendship bought her the job. There's no clean move here." I chose a 4th option. I chose the one that let me sleep at night. I went into work the next morning and I called the hiring manager into my office and I told her to evaluate Cordelia's application exactly the way she would evaluate any other application. No special treatment, no boost, no penalty. I said, "Treat her like a stranger who sent in a resume. If she's qualified, move her forward. If she's not, reject her. I don't want to be involved in any part of this decision." Then I called Dario. I told him what was happening. I said, "Do not put in a word for her. Do not put in a word against her. Pretend you never got that message from her." I called Robin and told her the same thing. I had removed myself. Whatever happened to Cordelia's application now would happen because of Cordelia's work, not because of me. I thought I could just let the system run and walk away from it emotionally. I was wrong about the last part. 3 weeks went by. The hiring manager came to my office on a Tuesday afternoon and sat down across from me and said, "I want to give you an update on the marketing director role." Then she said, "The candidate you recused yourself from, she's actually one of our top 2 candidates. On paper, she's excellent." I nodded. I kept my face still. The hiring manager left. I closed my office door and I felt something I was not expecting. Part of me was proud of Cordelia. She had earned her way to the final round without my help. Her work had spoken for itself. But another part of me, the part that remembered the coffee shop, the part that remembered the job alerts on her phone, that part was furious. Because if Cordelia got this job, she would have manipulated her way back into my life and walked through the door with a smile like she had earned it clean. A few days later, my phone buzzed. It was Cordelia. The text said, "I got to the final round. I know you said you recused yourself, and I respect that. I just wanted to say thank you for not blocking me." I did not respond. I told Robin about the text that weekend. Robin read it on my phone and said, "She's thanking you for not being petty. That's not gratitude. That's a compliment disguised as a leash." I asked Robin what she meant. Robin said, "She's framing your basic fairness as a gift. Like you could have been cruel, but you chose not to be. And now she wants you to feel good about yourself for being decent. That way you feel like you owe her something." I did not respond to Cordelia's text. Then something happened that I did not see coming. About a week later, I got a call from someone on the hiring team. The person explained that they were conducting standard reference checks. One of Cordelia's listed references was unavailable. They wanted to ask if I would be willing to provide a character reference. They were careful to explain that they understood I had recused myself from the hiring decision, but a personal character reference was separate from the business decision. I said I needed to think about it. I had taken myself out of the process, and now the process was reaching back through the wall and pulling me in. I called Robin that night. I said, "They want me to be her reference. If I say yes and I say good things, she gets the job and I feel like I lied. If I say yes and I tell the truth, I torpedo her and she'll say I was vindictive. If I say no, they'll wonder why her best friend of 17 years won't vouch for her." The silence on Robin's end lasted long enough that I pulled the phone away from my ear. Then Robin said, "Were you her best friend, or were you her measuring stick?" I did not answer. I could not answer. I just sat there on the edge of my bed with that question sitting on my chest like something heavy. I thought about 17 years. I thought about every comment she had made about my salary, about my car, about my apartment. I thought about the way she would look at me sometimes, like she was calculating my value in real time and coming up short. I thought about the coffee shop. I thought about her phone buzzing on the table. I thought about I needed a job before I needed a friend. And then I thought about the question the hiring team had actually asked me. They had not asked if Cordelia was my friend. They had asked about her character, and I knew her character. I made my decision. I agreed to the reference call. At 4 o'clock the next afternoon, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my phone on speaker. Emilio was in the kitchen behind me, just being there because I had asked him to be. The first questions were simple. "How long have you known Cordelia?" I said, 17 years. "How would you describe her work ethic?" I did not hesitate. "Cordelia is one of the hardest working people I know. She commits fully to whatever she's doing." That was true. Her work ethic was never the problem. Then the person on the line asked a different kind of question. "How does Cordelia handle professional relationships? Specifically, how does she treat colleagues she perceives as being at a different level than her? I stopped. This was the question. This was the hinge that everything swung on. I could give a safe answer. I could sidestep it. I could protect her. And in the silence while I was deciding, I heard it all again. I heard, "You will never make real money." I heard, "You are going to be a failure who lives off her teacher's pension." I heard 5 years of those comments. I took a breath and I said, Cordelia has a pattern of measuring people by their income and title. When she believes someone is below her professionally, she lets them know it. She does it casually enough that it sounds like teasing, but it's consistent and it's intentional. I experienced this personally for 5 years. She believed I was just a teacher making $60,000 a year, and she made sure I knew she thought that made me less than her. She didn't know I was running this company. When she found out, her first response was to ask me for a job, not to apologize, to ask for a job. There was a long silence on the line. Then the person said, "That's very helpful. Thank you for your honesty." The call ended. Emilio walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. I said, "I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I just told them who she is." Emilio squeezed my shoulder gently and said, "That's the hardest kind of honesty." 2 days later, Cordelia did not get the job. The hiring manager told me the decision was based on multiple factors, not just the reference. I believed her, but I knew my words had weight. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was Cordelia. One message. "I know it was you. You could have just said nothing. 17 years, and you couldn't just say nothing." I read it 3 times. Then I typed back, "You spent 5 years saying I'd never make real money." I spent 2 minutes telling the truth. We both said what we meant. Cordelia did not respond. 3 months later, I was grading papers at my kitchen table on a Sunday night. Emilio was cooking dinner behind me, and the kitchen smelled like garlic and oil and something warm. My phone buzzed. Robin had sent a photo from a work event at the company. A minute later, Dario sent me a joke about a typo someone had made in a company-wide email. I smiled at both messages and went back to the stack of essays in front of me. My life was full. My life was steady. My life was honest. I did not regret the reference call. I did not regret the dinner 2 years ago. I did sometimes miss the version of Cordelia I thought I knew at 16, but that version might never have existed. She might have just been the version I needed her to be before I understood who she really was. I picked up my red pen. I went back to grading. The teaching was always the point.